Okay, and welcome to the final video in the history of Arion Games. So we've looked at the early days, we've looked at the major lines, and indeed some of the minor RPG lines that Arion Games publishes. And the final sort of tranche of books I wanted to look at is the Savage Worlds based ones. So we obviously don't publish Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds is published by Pinnacle Entertainment Group. Fantastic game, adaptable game used for all sorts of different settings. And indeed, we had played it as part of my own gaming group in various settings. So why did I get involved in publishing Savage Worlds as an official Savage Worlds licensee? Well, it all goes back to this book, early 1990s, 1991, I think, 1994. There we go, 1994, The Crown and the Dragon. And this novel by Stephen Hunt, who is now a very well-known author, that was his debut novel, is a pseudo-Napoleonic Europe where there's been a disaster in the past and part of Europe has disappeared under the sea, and there's magic and there's beastmen in the forest and there's steam engines and there's wizards. And then there are these strange sort of inquisitor types and so on. And I remember reading it back in 1994. And obviously, as we've seen from the last video, even back then, I was interested in writing games and so on. And I remember reading this, and I remember the first time I ever read it, and I thought, wow, what an incredible setting for an RPG. And they did nothing at all with it before, 30 years-ish, 28 years, something like that. But I was having a bit of a clear out and I came across this book in a box. I thought, oh, wow, haven't seen that for ages, haven't read it for a long, long time. So that was my book to read. I read through it and thought, you know what? I remember what I thought first time around. It would make an incredible setting for a game. But what game? And obviously at that time, my thoughts turned to things like Maelstrom. Not really. Maelstrom's quite gritty, realistic. And I thought, AFF, again, not really. It doesn't really fit. And I thought, what it really needs, it needs something sharp-ish. And what I mean by that, for those of you who are not aware, is Sharp is a series of Napoleonic novels by Bernard Cornwell. And Richard Sharp is a rifleman. He fights through India. He fights across Europe. He fights the French. He fights his mates. He fights just about anyone. And in the Sharp books, as indeed you've got to some extent in these books, you've got Richard Sharp, and he's on a battlefield, and there's loads of Frenchmen around him, and then he sees his enemy, the Captain Wolf or whoever the big enemy of that book is. And he fights his way across, and 3 Frenchmen jump in the way, and he cuts them down, and then 2 more take a shot at him, and he gets out of the way, and he cuts them down, and then he fires a pistol at one. Then he gets to the enemy, and then there's another whole chapter where he fights the enemy. So what you've got is you've got the classic RPG MOOC rules. You've got the minor enemies that go down relatively quickly. They pose a bit of a threat, but not major, but they are there to get in the way of the big boss. And of course, my thoughts turned to Savage Worlds because Savage Worlds does that so well. It's quite cinematic. It can obviously do a whole load of different settings. It's got rules for guns and vehicles and easy enough to design your own magic and your own monsters and all the rest of it. So I thought, that's what we do. So I thought, but, as I mentioned in the previous video, my gaming has so influenced Arion Games that when I think about running a new game now, I think about how can Arion Games publish it, not just how can I run it for my group. So I firstly got in touch with Stephen, and after a brief discussion, I said, look, I would really like to turn this into an RPG. He said, brilliant, go for it. So I did, went for it. And then I thought, right, so if we're going to publish it, we need the agreement of Pinnacle Entertainment, and contacted them, and they have a licensee program, and obviously you have to submit for approval and all the rest of it. Fine. and we produced this. So you need the Savage Worlds book, and that is one of the licensee things. With AFF, for example, if we do a superhero AFF, and there are plans for that, it will be a rule book that you pick up and play superhero AFF. You won't need the AFF core book. In the same way that Stellar Adventures is a sci-fi AFF book. You don't need AFF to play it. One of the things about licensees with Savage Worlds is you have to go back to the original rule book. You can't put the rules in. So this is a setting book, and it includes rules for being a Dragon Brown, and they're the scum of the earth soldiers that form the characters. And there's new edges, and there's some new skills, and there's some new weapons, and there's some new rules like loading. Because in Savage Worlds, if you've got a black powder weapon, it takes you 2 rounds to load it. What I wanted, again, was very much a sharpish element, or even a Crown of the Dragon element, where some characters are much faster at loading than others. If you look at the actual Napoleonic Wars, the British tended to win a lot of battles because they fired 3 to 4 shots per minute, whereas the French conscripts, who were relatively untrained, would fire 1 to 2 per minute. And that hail of fire enabled the British to win lots of battles. And I wanted there to be that differentiation. A lot of Savage Worlds games have a base mechanic. Well, I didn't want a base in this, but what I did was a regiment. So you belong to your regiment, and there's rules for generating the symbol and the commanding officer and where it comes from and so on and so forth, what the flag looks like. And then we put some rules in for mass battles. Now, the rules in here for mass battles are based on the Savage Worlds mass battle rules, which are you've got so many points and you make some rolls and then you remove points from the opposition, then you make some more rolls and remove points. But once I'd finished this, bestiary, setting and all the rest of it, I thought, you know what? That could work really, really, really well as a war games rule set as well, and it could tie in well. And you may or may not be aware that the original Savage Worlds rules were actually written for a skirmish game, a Wild West skirmish game. So going back to skirmish battle rules, no problem. So we published that. And it was while I was writing that, I think my son said to me, couldn't use that for a fantasy game, a fantasy war game, because we've been playing some Warhammer. And he said, you know, I think it'd work really well for a fantasy game. And I thought, yep. So I wrote that and that one. And the third book, which is a setting codex to take it into sci-fi, historical, ancient, modern, etc., is in progress, quite delayed. It was a sort of stretch goal for the Kickstarter. It is quite delayed simply because there's so much other stuff on, but it is being written and it will be done and hopefully will be out this year. So we've got Crown and Dragon, we've got war games, and actually we still play war games with this, and it works really, really, really rather well. But now that you've got that license, it means you can keep publishing books. And I'm thinking, what else can we do with it? And one of the ones we did was Invasion. So this is effectively XCOM, which is an old computer game, XCOM, the RPG. When I say RPG, what I mean is single-person character combat simulator. There is an element of the role-playing, but this really is an action game. This is, you have a small team of soldiers, normally 1 PC per player and 1 NPC, minor soldier per player. And then what you do is off you go, you battle an alien invasion, and these aliens could be, basic aliens like grey alien soldiers. Or when you get more powerful, there can be things like disruptors and so on. And so you keep going out and you collect alien parts and you upgrade them to upgrade your assault rifles to laser rifles and your Kevlar armor to battle armor and so on and so forth. It's not a deep game. There's no real meta background to it. It is off you go, blow up some aliens, bring the parts back, and then next week go out on another mission. Now, where it does work really well is as a filling game. So you're playing your D&D campaign, whatever, AFF campaign. You 1 week, one person can't turn up, and you don't want to carry it on because it's a critical part. Break out this, do another mission. If it takes you a year or 2 years to get through your 20 missions and complete the arc, whatever. Because you're not having to remember a story or whatever. You're just almost building a combat character. So nice little fun. And what we actually did last year, maybe a year before, was we actually did a whole day's gaming where we ran 5 of these and we rotated the GM around each player. And so each player ran their own mission. And because the mission generation essentially allows you to drop your own map in, the mission I ran was where the aliens land in my, in the marketplace of my local town. So I know it. I can close my eyes and picture that marketplace. Invasion, classic fantasy campaign. Now this one actually tied in with this one. Because one of the great things about having an RPG rule set that also allows you to do war games is you can merge the two almost seamlessly. So in this, it's a classic fantasy campaign, 0 to hero type campaign. You start off minor and you go through some dungeons, you fight more powerful enemies and et cetera, et cetera. Up until, so that's, so far so normal. Until you get to these missions here, I think the veteran ones, mission 10, there, where you have to go and save the halfling village of Greenwald. And there are 3 enemy units, 1 large creature, and some enemy wildcard NPCs. And the players have their own units. It's only a fairly small battle, 4 units on each side-ish. So it's not a big battle, but you've got a war game that the players can take part in using the same roles, the same stats, the same rules. Quite a lot of RPGs have a thing whereby you have mass battle rules, but you have to abstract your character to take part in that. With this, you are moving your figure around on the tabletop for your character, and when you're rolling your attack roll, your fighting roll, using the same fighting roll you used in the dungeon last week, and we'll use in the dungeon next week, and you're rolling the same attack dice, and your edges have the same benefit and same rules, and so on. So you've got a fight there, and then you've also got another fight. Where is it? I think number 15. Yeah, Battle at the Temple, and so on. So this was written to support this. And you don't have to have this one to do it, but it was quite a nice tie-in. So we did that. And then the most recent Savage Worlds one we've done is Savage Gladiators. And this is again, in a way, it's a bit like the Viking game that I talked about earlier, or the Humanish game. This is a gladiator game, Roman gladiator game, and you can do fantasy gladiators or semi-mystical gladiators or straight historical gladiators. But again, Savage Worlds works well because it's quite an action-heavy game with lots of little fiddly bits you can apply. So you can have a gladiator who taunts enemies and really upsets them, and that makes them less effective. Or you could have just a massive, really strong, really tough gladiator. Maybe he's not so great at hitting people. When he hits them, they stay hit. Or maybe a really small, agile gladiator. Or you could have a really intelligent gladiator who uses their brain to go faster or do more things, or etc. And you've got lots of options of ways you can go. If you were to do that in AFF, you'd be limited to just one talent, and that wouldn't necessarily distinguish. Here, you've got different builds. And that's not brilliant for all games, but for this, I think it works perfectly well. So there is still another day of our 20th anniversary celebration. If you have supported us during that, fantastic. Thank you very much. And we have lots of books on our to-do list. Lots of AFF books, lots, so many, so that I'm starting to wonder exactly how I'm going to fit them all in. I'm having to try and schedule them. We've got the Savage Worlds Codex. We've got a sci-fi adventure that ties in with the setting codex. we've got another Crown and Dragon book. There's another Sorcerer Turok book. There's more Doomsday books. So there's a lot coming this year, next year. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully this series of videos has been interesting.